Looking back at BlackBerry's journey, I find it somewhat alarming, perhaps even frightening, how rapidly a dominant player can lose everything. Let me explain. Roughly 10 years ago, owning a BlackBerry device was the ultimate status symbol. It represented cutting-edge technology and sophistication. That's certainly how I perceived it, and I suspect many of you did too. Feel free to share your memories in the comments. These devices had that unmistakable appearance, complete with a full QWERTY keyboard that became their signature feature. The keyboard wasn't just functional, it was central to their appeal. Interestingly, the company name itself came from this design element. Those early models featured keys with a distinctive oval shape and spacing that resembled the druplets on an actual BlackBerry fruit. The name also worked perfectly from a marketing standpoint. Short, punchy, with those hard consonant sounds that commanded attention. The device became synonymous with professional communication, transforming how business operated through email functionality and eventually BlackBerry Messenger. Major celebrities embraced the technology, from Kim Kardashian to Katy Perry, and notably President Barack Obama, who famously stated he was the first president to use one. Years later, he joked that nobody else had his pen. When discussing their decline, the sales figures tell an incredibly stark story. Global unit sales climbed consistently year after year, reaching approximately 50 million devices around 2010 to 2011. Then came the crash, a steep downward trajectory that brought sales to nearly 1 million units by 2016. That same year, the company announced it would cease manufacturing phones internally, licensing production to external partners, primarily TCL from China. TCL eventually lost this licensing agreement in 2020, with Onward Mobility taking over the rights. However, current activity pales in comparison to their glory days. Hey, quick favor before we dive deeper. If you're enjoying this deep dive in a company's documentary, smash that like button and subscribe. Today, I want to examine this corporation's origins, their path to dominance, and, crucially, what caused their downfall. Here's an interesting detail. The organization behind BlackBerry was originally named Research in Motion throughout most of its history. They only rebranded to BlackBerry in 2013, ironically after their flagship product had already begun declining. The driving force behind Research in Motion was Mike Lazaridis. At age 5, he immigrated from Turkey to Canada with his family, which explains why the company is Canadian headquartered, despite finding most success in American markets. In 1984, at just 23 years old and mere credits away from completing his electrical engineering degree at the University of Waterloo, Lazaridis made a bold decision. He left school to launch a venture with Doug Fredgen, his close friend and fellow student. Initially, their company lacked clear direction, taking on various engineering projects. Their breakthrough came from General Motors, who paid $600,000 for an LED messaging board designed for factory workers. Eventually, they secured work with Rogers, a telecommunications provider, involving their messaging infrastructure. This contract led them into wireless communications, where they began producing wireless radio modems. In 1997, they unveiled the Interactive Pager. Note that the A is actually in its symbol. This two-way pager enabled both receiving and transmitting messages wirelessly. The company believed professionals using traditional one-way pagers would gladly pay $675 for this upgrade, and they were largely correct. Within a year, these interactive pagers dominated their business. Their 1998 IPO raised over $100 million, helping fulfill a massive backlog of $100 million in pager orders. Revenue more than tripled to exceed $20 million that year. But the real breakthrough arrived in early 1999 when Research in Motion launched their inaugural BlackBerry device, the 850 model. This original unit offered something revolutionary: email capability through wireless connectivity. Reading and composing emails while mobile was groundbreaking technology then. By 2001, both the 850 and the more advanced 857, which resembled a classic BlackBerry design, had overtaken interactive pagers as their primary product. However, these early models couldn't actually function as phones. The first genuine BlackBerry smartphone was the 5810, introduced in 2002. It received substantial criticism for lacking an integrated microphone or speaker, rather unusual for a phone. Users needed to connect a wired headset to make calls. While included, this proved inconvenient, especially when scrambling to find and plug in the headset during incoming calls. Users must have developed quite a panic response to ringtones. Nevertheless, combining cellular communication and email with organizational tools like calendars and contact lists made this the ultimate device for business professionals. That was their target demographic, so their initial national advertising campaign focused on business and technology publications. Most purchases came from corporations providing devices to employees, technology firms like Dell, financial institutions like Merrill Lynch, and even government agencies adopted BlackBerry phones. Eventually, they penetrated the consumer market. Celebrities made them fashionable, and BlackBerry Messenger proved crucial. It provided seamless communication between BlackBerry users, creating social pressure. If you didn't own one, you were excluded from conversations. Subsequent years brought new models with enhanced features, though they maintained their iconic design and focused on the email and messaging capabilities that drove their initial success. By most financial metrics, 2011 represented their peak year. Looking at the complete picture, and I've rarely seen a graph that illustrates a story so dramatically. Revenue reached nearly $20 billion in 2011, up from $1 billion several years prior, then plummeting below $1 billion within just a few years. Net income followed a similar trajectory. Substantial profits in 2011 transformed into significant losses by 2014. So what happened in 2011 that triggered BlackBerry's catastrophic decline? I hesitate to oversimplify, but I'd argue the keyboard played the central role in both BlackBerry's rise and fall. I've been alluding to this throughout. Their key features, email and BBM, were enhanced by the full keyboard, which provided tremendous advantages over typical market offerings. It defined their visual identity and inspired their name. They essentially constructed their entire brand identity around it. You surely anticipated this. In 2007, Apple unveiled the iPhone, and regardless of personal preference, it genuinely revolutionized the industry. Consider this irony. One of the most successful products in modern history was specifically engineered to improve upon BlackBerry's keyboard design. During that presentation, Steve Jobs displayed images of BlackBerry and similar devices, essentially identifying the built-in keyboard as their fundamental flaw and positioning the iPhone as the solution. He stated the problem was really sort of in the bottom 40% there, this stuff right here. The iPhone and its design philosophy took several years to gain traction due to its radical differences causing consumer hesitation. Remember those intense debates about whether touchscreens could truly replace physical keyboards? Additionally, the iPhone was exclusively available through AT&T initially, so customers loyal to other carriers couldn't access it. This created an opportunity. If Research in Motion's leadership had viewed that presentation and recognized the iPhone as a genuine threat, they arguably had sufficient time to respond appropriately. Their most significant direct response came with the BlackBerry Storm in late 2008, which clearly resembled an iPhone more than a traditional BlackBerry. It marked their first touchscreen device without a physical keyboard, much like the iPhone, and initially sold quite well. Released through Verizon, it offered loyal Verizon subscribers who couldn't purchase AT&T's iPhone a touchscreen alternative from an established brand. The fundamental problem was that it simply wasn't a quality phone. They implemented SurePress, technology requiring users to physically click the screen by pressing harder, seen as more gimmicky than practical. Additional complaints included an inferior browser compared to Safari, frequent freezing, slow performance, no Wi-Fi support, and reports that most units required replacement. Clearly, the BlackBerry Storm couldn't compete with the iPhone. By then, Apple had already released the iPhone 3G, with a hugely successful iPhone 4 arriving in 2010. That year, BlackBerry's smartphone market share began declining for the first time, eventually falling to essentially 0% by 2016. Remember, the overall smartphone market was expanding rapidly, so despite their market share steadily decreasing, 2011 still became their highest-selling year. The obvious issue was that iPhone sales were increasing far more dramatically. 2011 marked the first year iPhone sales surpassed theirs, and the gap only widened thereafter. Beyond the keyboard, I must acknowledge that Apple and competing smartphone manufacturers outperformed BlackBerry in application availability and mainstream consumer appeal. Throughout this period, I've emphasized BlackBerry's focus on corporations and business professionals. That was their foundation, and they never significantly diversified. Smartphones generally were perceived as practical professional tools, but the iPhone brought them to mainstream consumers for personal and entertainment purposes. BlackBerry never adequately adapted to this shift, missing out on countless potential customers. Even today, years later, I'd wager most viewers still associate BlackBerry primarily with business phones. In 2013, recognizing their struggles, the company implemented major changes attempting a turnaround. They nearly sold entirely but ultimately settled on a new name and new CEO. By 2016, they ceased producing BlackBerry phones, instead collecting licensing fees from manufacturers. Overall, they now generate most revenue through software and cybersecurity. In 2019, they spent over $1 billion acquiring an artificial intelligence company. They continue operating in a vastly different capacity as a much smaller organization. Let me know in the comments. Did you ever own a BlackBerry? If so, what years did you use it? And was it for business purposes? It's truly an extraordinary story. Few companies rapidly scale into the multi-billion-dollar range, only to collapse just as quickly. I won't claim the iPhone directly killed them, but I will say the iPhone transformed the industry, and BlackBerry failed to adapt to these new competitive dynamics. Do you agree with this assessment, or do you believe there are additional factors? Share your thoughts about BlackBerry in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching.